Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive, with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome back to the History AI podcast, where the past meets the power of AI. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, if you love history as much as we do, hit that subscribe button and drop us a 5-star review. It's the best way to help the podcast grow and reach more curious minds.
Seriously, your support keeps us going and ensures more epic stories, just like today's. Because today, we're talking about the man who might have inspired King Arthur himself, Owain Ursus.
Also known as Owain Ddantgwyn, the Bear King of Old Britain. Let's get into the legend, or maybe, the reality.
So let's set the stage. Mid-5th century Britain. Rome's gone, the legions have pulled out, and the island is now a patchwork of local kingdoms trying to hold things together while Saxon invaders push in from the east.
Right, this is what historians call sub-Roman Britain. The Roman Empire officially withdrew its troops around for 10 AD. What followed was a power vacuum. Native British leaders, some former Roman officers or local aristocrats, rose up to defend their territories.
Enter Owain Ddantgwyn. His name translates to white tooth in Welsh. He ruled over the Kingdom of Rose, a small but strategic area in what's now northwestern Wales. We know about him mostly through early Welsh genealogies and medieval sources, like the Harleian genealogies, which trace royal lineages back to him.
Owain was the son of Einion Urth ap Caneda. That name might sound familiar because Caneda is kind of a big deal. He's considered the founder of the Kingdom of Gwynedd. He migrated from the north, likely from Manaw Gododdin, modern-day Scotland, to repel Irish raiders in Wales.
So Owain comes from a serious warrior dynasty. And here's where it gets spicy. His son, Sinlas Gach, might be the same Cuneglysus criticized by the monk Gildas in his 6th century Screed Dixitio et Conquesta Britanniae.
Gildas was not a fan. He called Cuneglysus the charioteer of the bear's stronghold, which some think could refer to a hillfort like Dinas Bran or Deganwy. The mention of bear is key, because in Brythonic languages, Arthur means bear. Combine that with the Latin Ursus, and you get this theory that the Bear dynasty Owain's family might have inspired the Arthur legend.
Now Owain himself doesn't appear in Gildas's writings, but some scholars think Gildas was referencing his descendants. And that gives us indirect evidence of Owain's stature. He was likely powerful enough that his line was still prominent decades later.
And look, this was a brutal, chaotic time. Anglo-Saxons were moving in fast. The Battle of Mount Badon, which supposedly halted their advance for a generation, is said to have happened around this time. Some even think Owain may have led the forces that won it, or at least, he could have been part of the British coalition resisting the Saxons.
Meanwhile, Christian missionaries were gaining ground. The church was becoming a political force. If Owain supported Christianity, as many Welsh rulers did, he may have also played a role in that cultural transition.
All of this paints a picture of a man who wasn't just a footnote in a family tree. Owain Ddantgwyn was likely a regional king, a war leader, and a transitional figure between Rome and the medieval kingdoms that would follow.
And that's why the idea of him being a prototype for King Arthur isn't totally far-fetched. He lived in the right place, at the right time, with the right pedigree, and maybe even the right nickname, the Bear.
Okay, so we've established who Owain Ddantgwyn was, or at least what we think we know about him. But why do some historians believe he might be the real King Arthur?
It comes down to a combination of names, geography, timing, and a big heap of educated guesswork. There's no single smoking gun, but a lot of tantalizing clues that, when lined up, suggest Owain could be the historical core behind the Arthur legend.
Let's start with the name. The legendary King Arthur's name may derive from the Celtic word artos, meaning bear. Owain Ddantgwyn's family is closely associated with this bear imagery. His son, Sinlas Gach, was possibly the figure Gildas called Cuneglysus, charioteer of the bear's stronghold. That bear symbolism might reflect a dynastic nickname.
And Gildas, writing only a few decades after these events, was not just making stuff up. He had access to sources we no longer do, and his criticisms of British rulers, like Cuneglysus, show they were prominent, maybe even dominating the political scene.
Now consider geography. Owain was likely based in Powys or Gwynedd, both near the Roman town of Viriconium, modern Wroxeter. Some researchers argued this was the real Camelot. Not a castle with turrets, but a fortified administrative center in the post-Roman world.
It's strategic, central, and still functioning in the 5th century. If you were leading British resistance against Saxon invasions, Viraconium would be the place to do it. Owain, as a regional king of Rose and possibly overlord of nearby territories, would have had both the motive and means.
Here's another detail: the Battle of Mount Badon. This legendary British victory, dated somewhere between 480 and 520, is one of the few specific events nearly all Arthurian traditions reference. No one can say for sure who led it. But Owain fits the timeframe and status of a unifying war leader.
But the real magic of this theory isn't just about was he Arthur or not. It's about reconstructing history from fragments. These were oral cultures. The Romans wrote everything down, but once they left, the British didn't keep centralized records.
Which is why piecing together someone like Owain is part archaeology, part folklore, part detective work. We're working with scraps, genealogies written down centuries later, Latin texts written by hostile monks, and place names that echo ancient meanings.
And that's why it matters. Preserving and studying even the smallest clues helps us keep those stories alive. Not just for romance or legend, but because these were real people navigating a collapsing empire, foreign invasion, and massive cultural change.
And sometimes, legends are history's way of remembering someone important when the facts are too fragile to survive. So when we study Owain Ddantgwyn, we're not just chasing shadows. We're trying to give voice back to a forgotten king, maybe the king.
We may never know for sure if he was Arthur. But asking the question sharpens how we understand history, and reminds us how easily it can slip through our fingers if we don't keep looking. Now, as much as we love a good theory, and the idea that Owain Ddantgwyn might be the man behind the myth of King Arthur is definitely compelling, mainstream historians are, let's say, cautious.
Very cautious. The biggest challenge here is the sheer lack of direct evidence. There's no medieval document that flat out says Owain Ddantgwyn was known as Arthur. And in historical terms, that's a huge gap.
Right. Most of what we're working with are inferences, patterns of names, geography, timelines, and connections between texts written well after the events in question. The earliest known references to Arthur appear in sources like Historia Brittonum, attributed to Nennius around the 9th century, roughly 400 years after Owain would have lived.
That's like us trying to write a biography of Charlemagne using only modern urban legends and Google Translate. It's not impossible, but it's a game of shadows and echoes.
One frequent criticism is that the Arthurian legend likely emerged as a composite, a blend of multiple war leaders, real and mythic, combined over time into a single heroic figure. Think of it like a historical remix. Owain might be one track in that mix, but not the whole song.
And then there's the issue of Gildas. He's our closest contemporary written source. But while he mentions kings like Cuneglaisus and Maelgwn, he never mentions anyone named Arthur, not even in passing. If Arthur had been the major unifying warlord of the era, wouldn't Gildas have at least acknowledged him?
Some argue that Gildas did reference him obliquely, or chose not to name him for political reasons. But that's speculation. And speculation, no matter how educated, isn't proof.
Then there's the linguistic argument. One key passage in Gildas refers to a bear-associated figure, which some link to Sinla's Gok, Owain's son. But Gildas uses the term avunculus, which typically means maternal uncle. Owain, according to genealogies, would have been Sinla's father. That's a linguistic snag that skeptics love to point out.
And yet, none of this debunks the theory entirely. The problem is that so much of this period, known as the Dark Ages, is undocumented. We only have fragments. The lack of evidence isn't evidence of absence. But it is a warning sign for historians to tread carefully.
That's why scholars like Graham Phillips and Martin Keatman, who argue in favor of Owain as Arthur, are often categorized as alternative historians. Their work is creative and thoughtful, but doesn't always meet the stringent standards of academic peer review.
Still, even the critics admit that Owain Ddantgwyn was a significant figure. Whether he was Arthur or not, he lived in the exact time and place the Arthurian myth emerged. That alone makes him historically important and worth studying.
And here's the key takeaway: the debate itself matters. History isn't just about locking down facts. It's also about interpretation, testing ideas, exploring connections, and understanding the stories people have told to make sense of their world.
Because when you strip it all down, what we're really doing here isn't just trying to prove or disprove a theory. We're trying to rescue memory from the rubble of time.
Alright, so we've looked at who Owain Ddantgwyn was, what connects him to the Arthur legend, and why historians love to argue about it. But now comes the really fun part. What does it all mean if Owain was Arthur, or even just a major inspiration for him?
Because let's face it, whether or not Owain drew Excalibur from a stone, he lived in a time and place that made him legendary material. The post-Roman world was a giant historical black hole, and yet someone, somehow, managed to anchor stories of resistance, unity, and leadership during that chaos.
If Owain really was the core of the Arthur myth, it changes how we view the legend. Arthur wouldn't be a mythical king of a golden age, but a gritty war leader fighting for scraps of Roman civility in a crumbling world.
Exactly. Forget gleaming armor and courtly love, imagine muddy hill forts, tribal councils, and armored war bands defending river crossings in Wales. Now that's what I call a night shift.
Chuck, did you just pun 1,000 years of military history?
You bet your round table I did.
Moving on, the idea that Owain might be Arthur grounds the legend in reality. It shifts the narrative from fantasy to heritage. If Arthur was real, then he was a product of his environment, a time when local kings fought to hold their lands, preserve Christianity, and pass on a fractured sense of Roman identity.
And that's profound. Because so much of early British identity is wrapped up in this Arthurian myth. If Owain helped inspire that, if his resistance to Saxon expansion became the seed of an enduring national story, then he's arguably one of the most influential figures in British history, without anyone knowing his name.
It also raises another big what if. What if Owain or someone like him had been able to fully unite the Britons? What if the Saxons had been pushed back entirely? Would we even have an England today, or would it be a federation of Brythonic kingdoms still speaking a kind of Welsh?
Maybe Geoffrey of Monmouth would have been writing in Cymric, and Camelot would be a historical site, not a symbol.
And from a broader perspective, these kinds of stories remind us why history isn't just a list of dates. It's about narrative, identity, and continuity. Legends like Arthur don't just entertain, they help cultures remember who they were, and imagine who they might become.
So whether Owain Ddantgwyn was the real Arthur, or just the bear-sized shadow behind the myth, he reminds us that even when the facts fade, the impact of a life can echo for centuries.
And if nothing else, he proves one thing: never underestimate a guy named a White Tooth riding into battle with a bear's name and a royal pedigree.
Now that's how you bear the weight of history.
Not again.
So there you have it, Owain Ddantgwyn. A shadowy king of post-Roman Wales, a father of warriors, and maybe, just maybe, the real man behind the myth of Arthur.
He might not have worn plate armor or had a wizard sidekick, but what he did have was courage, legacy, and a story that refuses to be forgotten.
And that's what we love about doing this show, digging into history's quiet corners, shining a light on the figures who shaped the world, even if their names got lost in translation somewhere between reality and legend.
We want to say a massive thank you to everyone tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, the best thing you can do to support us is to hit that subscribe button and leave a 5-star review wherever you listen.
Seriously, those reviews help new listeners find the show, and they let us keep bringing you historical dives powered by AI and grounded in real historical research.
Don't forget, we've got brand new History AI podcast merchandise, mugs, shirts, and tote bags. Check out the link in the show notes.
We also love hearing from you, topic suggestions, questions, even just nerdy banter. Hit us up on social media or through the contact form on our site.
And remember, every episode we make is evergreen. You can jump in anytime and still enjoy the full story, no matter when you listen.
Until next time, I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Stay curious, stay questioning, and keep asking the biggest what-ifs in history.
And never forget, sometimes a forgotten king with a cool nickname can end up being the most legendary figure of all.
Catch you next time on the History AI podcast.
In the shadowed hills of Cymru's land, where the forests meet the sea, a chieftain rose with sword in hand, a prince of mystery. They called him Owain Ddantgwyn, bold, a lion cloaked in bear's disguise. But whispers through the valleys told that Arthur walked in mortal guise. Owain Ursus, thunder's son, guardian of the setting sun. Truth or tale, the line is blurred, but still we sing his name in word. A king who might have won the crown before the myths would write him down. The Roman eagles lost their flight, the Saxon tide began to swell, but Owain stood through darkest night, a warlord time would never quell. In Gwyn's winds and Powys' reign, he carved his name in iron flame. With every foe and bloody plain, a legend grew beneath his name. Owain Ursus, thunder's son, guardian of the setting sun. Truth or tale, the line is blurred, but still we sing his name in word. Was he the king of sword and lore, or just the man who came before? They say he fell with shield unbent, defiant to his final breath. But stories like the banner send still rise and ride beyond his death. Some say he was the Arthur lost, the king behind the dream we seek. But history hides what truth may cost, and legends never truly speak. Owain Ursus, thunder's son, guardian of the setting sun. Truth or tale, the line is blurred, but still we sing his name in word. If Arthur lived and walked this shore, then Owain's ghost will ride once more. So raise your cups by Cymru's stone to the king whose fate is still unknown. For in the mist where tales are spun, he lives again, the thunder's son.